I'm just here to validate that you guys made the right choice by being in this session, because I'm going to make you laugh, I'm going to make you cry. It's going to be a roller coaster of emotions. I feel like whenever I present, I'm like a substitute teacher. I make sure there's lots of videos, it's really fun. You know, everybody else has the serious stuff, but I think you're lucky here. It's going to be great. Or I'm going to say it's great, and then you guys have to just agree with me. So I'm going to try to do dual things and like press on my computer and then look up here. But my name is Kay-Sue. I'm the global lead for Instagram at Creative Shop. And what I do is make sure that all of our creative agency partners and brands out there really understand how to actually build creative for our platform and tell their stories. So that's really what I do. This is like a little bit of me. If anybody knows Andrew Keller, that's him at Cannes. I was just telling everybody this story, how he made me reshoot this 4 million times. You would never think that he would be so vain about his hair, but he actually is very, very vain. So what am I going to talk about? I'm going to actually talk about building for our platform today. But I'm going to start with, okay, let's forget this, it's not working. Okay, so I'm going to talk about some fundamentals. Like everybody in this room here, probably great marketers, great storytellers, so I'm not going to belabor the point. But I thought it would be really good just to set some ground rules. So what do most successful businesses do on Instagram, right? They're designing for the frame, they're capturing imagination, and they're turning inspiration into action. So what does that actually mean? When you think about designing for the frame, it means having a really good understanding of how visual the platform is and what you actually have to do. And when we talk about capturing imagination, we're talking about inspiring. People come to Instagram to be inspired. They're there to connect with their passions. I mean, it's the only place in the world where lots and lots of people come just to see, a little hamster eating a burrito. Like, that's the place that this is. Full of creativity, from things that are very curated and very beautiful and very polished, all the way to just really fun memes, right? It's kind of like the cultural zeitgeist. And again, it's really where people come and like really share their passions, share their creativity, and really share all of the things that they love in the world. Sorry, pressed too late. Capturing imagination is about, again, standing out in feed, right? Making sure that you're standing out. This is a platform with over 700 million people. That's 700 million different feeds, right? There's all these content creators. Smartphones are amazing now. You can actually create videos. You can take really great pictures. In fact, recently, there's a guy that actually won an Oscar just by shooting an entire movie on his phone. That's how creative this is. So when we talk about capturing imagination, we mean really this is a platform to really be as creative as possible, to push all the boundaries as much as possible, and to innovate creatively to really tell your story in the modern day. And the last one is turning inspiration to action. Again, people are coming to be inspired here. Instagram is a really great place to be inspired, but it's also a really good jumping point for anybody who wants to take action. Considering the visual canvas. I'm going to belabor this point a little bit throughout the whole thing, but Instagram is a visual platform. Over 80% of the people on our platform are actually outside of North America. And I think it really speaks to the point that you don't need actually words, right, to express yourself. And that's why visual storytelling is so important. And actually a lot of millennials are starting to communicate just with messages. Right? Imagine we're all bombarded with so many marketing messages every single day. How can we actually start telling stories in a very fun, quick way where they can consume it? We process images 60,000 times faster than we process words. And so that's why Instagram has really thrived globally as a global platform. Sorry, this is kind of timely, right, for today. But this is from Time, and I love it. Again, they've really reinvented the cover. And just, again, very simply with visuals, you get the point, you get the story. And this is a Buick from Marbella for Super Bowl. So considering the entire canvas, we always talk about integrated marketing. Like we talk about consistency through channel, storytelling, the red thread, and the importance of being consistent so that your consumer knows what your story is, and having one singular message in market to be really effective. What we forget to talk about is actually having a holistic experience within a singular platform. In Instagram, we have such a lovely creative canvas. You have organic stories, you have ads and stories, you have newsfeed, you have the page, you have the grid, right? There's so many ways to express yourself, and there's lots of brands who are taking advantage advantage of this, but there's also lots of brands who aren't. And I think it's such a wonderful opportunity to actually create a very holistic and very rich experience on Instagram. And then this is Spotify for South by Southwest. Again, they use live, they use stories, they use ads and stories, they use the feed just to tell their entire story. And it's incredibly rich and very, very captivating as well. Okay, got it. Okay, but what else? So this is what I'm really here to talk about is, and you're gonna see lots of amazing builds. This is the thing I'm proudest of this deck is these builds. But how do you actually hack storytelling, right? For us at Creative Shop, what we try to do is actually experiment, prototype, figure out how we can partner with creative agencies and brands to push the boundaries of creativity. And these are 4 areas that we're starting to explore. We're rethinking the context, we're rethinking time, we're crafting for space, and we're playing with dimension. And the first 2 things are actually really around building for people, and the last 2 things are really about our product. So I'm gonna go through each of these. So first one, rethinking context. Amazing, right? I'm so proud of this. I'm gonna keep on playing it again and again. So any of you guys who have ever been to a presentation by Facebook, we always talk about
We've been fed
building
a
from
lie
without sound. So I'm gonna let this play for a second.
that hard work is enough. We use something more powerful. Creativity. It starts new religions, defies the status quo, reinvents routine.
So this is great. I think we lean back on saying you have to always soundproof, right? Make sure that you're designing for sound off. What we're actually finding as we're looking deeper into consumer behavior is that people want to consume content in different ways. There's lean back moments where you want to turn on the sound and you want to see the whole story. And there's moments where you're on your mobile phone and you just want something very quick. And so this is actually the same ad that they cut, but designed for the feed with sound off. So again, they're making sure that there's subtitles, again, respecting that the fact that people consume through their feed with sound off, but they're also giving you the option of having sound on as well. But again, very visual. They edited to make sure that the narrative is very, very clear, even if the sound isn't there to partner with it to tell the whole story. Another really interesting thing about talking about sound off, actually Julie from Pandora, who's in the crowd right here, just talked about this, is again, we've always hammered on designing for sound off, and that would still be a recommendation that we would make as sort of the table stakes for designing creative for mobile. But what's really interesting is with stories, we're finding that actually people turn their sound on 60 to 70% of the time. And we don't exactly know why. We know that that's a behavior that's happening. And so all of a sudden, sound becomes another creative tool that you can use, right? It's another character in the story that you're telling, and all of a sudden you have an extra tool just to make your things more richer and much more deeper. So I'm gonna show you an example of this. So this is a prototype by a creative shopper in Canada, sound off. And then this is the sound on. And it's just such a beautiful way of, again, telling that extra bit about that story, adding richness and dimension like never before. Okay, re-arcing stories for time. So when we talk about time, we're actually talking about attention. And when we talk about attention, we're actually talking about people. So this is really about building for people and building for how people actually want to consume instead of shoving messages at people the way we want to shove them to them at. That sounded really weird, but the way we want to shove it down their throats. So anyways, we're at Facebook, we're designing about all these products again to really match with consumer behavior, right? So there's 13 products that we have, from GIFs to short videos, vertical video, all the way down to here, where it's longer form, complex attention, which is canvas, ad break, so more immersive products as well. But at Creative Shop, we also think about content. How do we actually develop content to actually pair with all these different ways of consuming content, whether you're on the go, you're leaning back, or you're wanting to engage? So this is a thought that we actually had at Instagram. It's how would you actually tell the story with time as a tool or time as a constraint, right? Here again, permanent, if you will, and I use that lightly, but feed would be a great place for that. Ephemeral would be using stories where your story only lasts 24 hours. And then the thought for us would be like, and the considerations would be, how would you actually design content that's very compelling, that people get very quickly and will remember, considering it disappears and you can't go back to it. And then lastly, live. So live is forever. It's like the new broadcast, which is really interesting. But again, because it doesn't live on Instagram and it disappears, how do you design messages that people can just jump in, understand very quickly, jump out, or consume long enough that they want to stay for the whole broadcast? This is an example from J.Crew where they launched a range of pink items for spring, and they used the entire canvas, and they used time as a way to tell their story. So again, they're really responding to the way people want to consume stuff, and they're designing the content appropriately around each of the touch points on Instagram. This is a fun example from McDonald's. I love it. Everybody that knows me in this room, and I see a few of you guys know that I'm obsessed with McDonald's. All I can do is like keep on like eating it and hoping that I don't get fat. So re-arching stories for time. McDonald's recently had a promotion where they were giving away the special Big Mac sauce. And they wanted to do it on live. And they actually wanted to do it on every single live channel possible. So YouTube, Periscope, Instagram Live, and Facebook Live. And what they actually found is that they had the most reach on Instagram. Because they were thinking about the different platforms and how people were consuming behavior. So again, this becomes interesting because they had a 15-minute live section about giving away this special sauce at special locations. But what they thought about is like, how can we always repeat our messages so that anybody who's just tuning in will get that message, and you don't have to actually be there at the very beginning to understand what they're doing. So it's very interesting to see how they construct this live narrative for people that are actively choosing to engage with that content. So re-arching stories of time. This is about narrative arcs and thinking about, again, how you actually create narratives and storytelling around how people are consuming content. The first one is around focus. So this is an example from Sao Paulo around Macbeth launch a year ago. It's like Game of Thronesy. It's kind of cinematograph-like, but it's very simple, right? You kind of get what the story they're trying to tell about like this new film. This is another one as well. So we call that about focusing attention. Very simple. It's a GIF. You look at it, you get it, you consume it. These are other ways to actually structure narrative around very quick. This is a beta example from Lay's in Russia. Again, very, very simple, very, very quick. It's going around and around. It's very easy to consume. And then this is rhythm and frequency. This is heartbeat. Like for Puma, they're recycling their message and getting their brand in there every few seconds. So again, if you miss something, miss a slight second, you're not going to miss who it's from. And so this is really important for ad recall. And then thinking again about narrative arcs. I'm going to play this for a second.
It starts as soon as the gun goes off. You're not focused on anybody in the race. Everything feels like slow motion, but it's happening fast. Track is the coolest sport. It's a way that I was able to make it out of my bad situation. My mom's boyfriend, he just wasn't together. He told me if I hit him, then I better knock him out.
But it's a soft story.
It's not going to be good. And then he kicked me out of the house. If it wasn't for the builders, they picked me up and they said pretty much that they want me to live with them.
The conflict,
it's something
and then
that
there's going to be, obviously a denouement and a climax, and then the resolution of it. This is a campaign for New Balance that we worked on with Tongle.
We did a time trial.
And so again, this is pretty much straightforward narrative arc that we're all used to. That's very present in Above the Line and also very present in books
to one of the top runners in the country.
So we work with them to actually restructure the narrative arc, so that's a little bit different. And again, it's really to address the different attention spans that people actually have. How can we actually tell the same story? So instead of, again, he's working, he's like, I'm a dude, I had a very sad life, but I became one of the world's fastest runners. So what we did is actually restructure it and took the denouement and put it in the front and use it as a hook and bait to get people to pay more attention to it. And this is what happened. So again, it starts with, oh, this is the conflict. He was homeless, but now he's one of the world's fastest runners. So then you're like, if you're scrolling really quickly, you actually know what they're trying to hook you with, and you can decide whether or not you want to stay. So it's a little bit different in terms of how you structure your narrative arcs and how you structure your stories in order to grab people and then make them stay with you to get the whole story. Crafting for space. This is really about the product and the entire Instagram canvas that we have at our disposal to really tell our stories. So we have Square. We've had that for a long time. It's very iconic to Instagram. We also now have Portrait as well. And what's really interesting is that we now have a full immersive screen experience with stories. What's really interesting is that this is exactly the same ad in different aspect ratios, and you'll actually see that it feels very different.
This season, you'll get your treat, and they'll get theirs. Buy any 5 McCafe beverages, like a limited-time pumpkin spice latte. Get one free in the app. Install now.
So you look at this, it feels different. And then you look at it in full screen format. It feels very different. All of a sudden, it feels very intimate. You feel very connected, particularly if there's characters or human characters in the story. And so why is this interesting? It's interesting because it's actually now a tool also for developing tone and mood. Like, we never really thought about space as a way to tell stories, but I think it's an extra layer of consideration now that we have all these formats at our disposal. And so here are some prototypes that we developed at Creative Shop. Vertical for us has been a very interesting space for us to explore, particularly since, the world is moving towards vertical. A lot of social platforms have vertical formats. Instagram certainly does. And so what we're trying to do is figure out, besides framing, which is one way to approach vertical content, how can we actually embrace the vertical content and look at it as real estate and more real estate to play with? And so these are some of the prototypes that we've developed. I'm going to caveat this. There's no music, so I'm going to stand here and hum awkwardly while I play these. But hopefully you can see them and then see how we're exploring and prototyping with the vertical space and how we're hopefully going to partner with creative agencies to explore this and innovate on the vertical space even more. The first prototype is around stacking, so taking existing landscape assets and stacking them together. So you see the original for Listerine, and again, this is a prototype by Creative Shop, so it's not actually an asset, but we're just trying to play with existing assets to figure out how we can actually start thinking and partnering with brands to teach them how to build for vertical. So as you can see, they've taken landscape assets and they're just stacking them on top, using the full spectrum, and then also using the scrolling feeling, with a marquee on the top and the bottom, using text as well to fill that in. Tiled. Again, taking an asset and then using frame and framing it up and using that whole space and then just cutting it up, right? Again, it's another dimension to a story that you never had before. And it's all with framing and very thoughtful and considerate layering on top as well. Heads and tails. Well, what if you only had a square asset, right? How do you actually, without using too much effort, expand that so that it's a vertical and immersive experience? Well, you can actually start using the top and the bottom. Again, you can just add to that wonderful real estate that you have that you never had before. And this is my all-time favorite because it has the Muppets, and I'm like a 12-year-old girl. Split frame. And I think this one is particularly interesting if you're telling a story around characters. Because again, vertical screens just it's so immersive, it's so rich, it's just a different experience. And so this is for Amex around their Small Business Saturdays with the Muppets. And what's interesting is, again, they had a landscape screen and they stacked the characters on top. And all of a sudden it feels different, right? From the characters sitting across from each other to the characters stacking on top of each other. It feels like they're talking to each other in real time. We have Carousel on Instagram. And recently we just launched a product build where now advertisers and even our members of our community have access to 10 spots. I think this is such an incredibly rich place to play for brands. You can tell stories very long, very short. This could be images, but it can also be video as well. So if you think about that, if you have 60 seconds for each tile, like how you can tell stories about individual characters, you can tell chapters of stories. It becomes a really rich place. And because it's multimedia, you can use both video and you can use images as well. So this is an example from Puma from Co-Collective. And again, very clever, just looking at how they're actually using a spread that they have and then applying that to Instagram. And then crafting for space. Again, the entire canvas there. I don't want to belabor the point, but I kind of do. That's why I am. But I really think it's such a rich place to play. There's video, there's carousel, there's 10 spots in carousel, there's immersive screen, there's live. There's all these things to actually play with that are super interesting on Instagram. So I don't want everybody to walk away thinking, oh, it's just like the feed or it's just a square. No, there's actually lots of things to play with and lots of places to innovate. It's like the Wild West on Instagram right now, and that's what I love. I love seeing brands experiment. I love seeing all the creative agency partners that we have, like pressing the canvas more and more to show how creative that they can be and how different they can tell their stories on Instagram. And this is from Bose. Again, doing some sponsored advertising. They did some live as well, and then they did some sponsored with us as well, with some DPA. All very consistent narrative, and again, a really good experience for anyone who gets all three of these ads. And then playing with dimension. It's an interesting thing. When I joined Facebook, we only had image ads. And now we have all these things to play with, particularly on Instagram. We have video now, this is an example, using video and mimicking 3D. We have Zoom, which I think is an untapped opportunity for brands, but this is from Limerita, but using that, woo, amazing. Playing again with video, with Gucci. Again, just it creates a sense of depth, right? Dimensions, like never ending. After a couple of drinks, this could get a little bit dizzy. And then this is from Master Dynamic. Again, using video to create a sense of depth, using a lot of visual mechanics just to visualize sound in a way that hasn't before. Master Dynamics is very interesting because they're an audio brand, and they've really figured out ways to communicate sound without actually using sound. Again, they're really respecting the feed, knowing that people are consuming without sound. And then interaction as well. This is from a hackathon that we did last year. And again, very interesting to see how Volvo, has moved away from brochureware and the super polished advertising that they have to develop this with their agency. Again, it's a way of making the audience feel compelled to actually play with this and then actually feel like they're going on a test drive. And this one is from Wendy's. It's just from our beta. Again, they're really thinking about how can we actually play with interaction with stories and ads. And so they played a little bit with the pause button. So what they were trying to do is develop an association with fresh beef. And so you could pause and instead, what would you get if you were pausing frozen beef? And so a pause would land you to something. And again, it's something fun, it's interactive. It really plays well with Wendy's fun attitude. And then as well, it's about really thinking about the format and designing for that format. So what's next? Just kidding. Okay, bad build. You tell us. So what we're hoping to do is, again, not come out with rules and guidelines. At Creative Shop, we're really here to inspire and provoke. We're also here to partner with the creative industry to make sure that we're innovating and pushing as hard as we can together. So play more. Thank you.